Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of This Podcast is Political. Part of this newsletter is political. I am here in the studio with my dad on this wonderful Saturday afternoon, and we're going to talk about one of the most relevant topics happening in Dallas, which is the start of the school year. I feel sorry for these children. I hated school. Well, it's not that I hated school. I just did not care too much to learn, which is not a good thing. And I hope that my future children are not like that, because learning is very, very good. But basically, it is the start of school. The school zones are now back being used, which has added about 20 minutes to my morning route to work. But there are a few issues that we want to highlight. Number one, school shootings, which is just kind of like a quick mention for what Texas is doing to temper down or try to prevent school shootings. We're also going to talk about Governor Abbott and his school choice agenda. And then we're also going to talk about the teacher shortage, which we could probably give some small insight to because of my brother, who is a teacher.
And your grandmother was a teacher.
And my grandmother was a teacher, that's right. And my grandfather and that side of the family was in journalism. So that we can talk a little bit about how far back that goes in our family. And was there another issue that you wanted to highlight?
Well, we'll talk about just the concerns.
Okay.
For the general concerns.
Okay.
Kids coming back.
Okay. Oh, like COVID and stuff?
And one quick note.
Mm-hmm.
And we just finished. Okay.
What?
It's August 13th, and kids are already back in school.
Yes.
We used to go to school Tuesday after Labor Day to the Friday before Memorial Day.
Yeah.
We used to have 3 full months of summer.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are being robbed. I know they get more time off during the school year and it's probably better, but as a person who was like, summer was 3 months and it ended and began on specific time frames.
But did it end in June?
No, most of the time. Well, here in Dallas or in Texas, it pretty much ended right around Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
Now, there may have been a couple of, if Memorial Day was early in the month, into May.
Mm-hmm.
So you had all of June. I mean, every now and then, I think I went 1 or 2 days in June, maybe 1 or 2 years. The rest of the time, we started after Labor Day.
Okay, you just went on a diatribe earlier, so we're gonna get straight to this point.
Go for it.
You folks are in for a doozy next week. Let me just say this. Okay, so we're gonna go straight into the issues facing students today. Number one, this, like I said, we're just gonna go over this really quick. The state pushing for expanded use of iWatch, Texas, in schools. Okay, this was not something that I was familiar with, or I don't believe it was in use when I was in school. Granted, I went to a private school, but still, basically what iWatch is a system meant to stop school shooters, which is quite interesting. It's meant to prevent school shootings, which is a hard sentence to say, but there have been, we just had Uvalde, so there have been instances in the past where school shootings are not uncommon. And in fact, there are measures needed to be taken, such as something like this, to prevent the loss of lives. Okay, so it's an app, and the app lets people anonymously report suspicious activity or behavior into the DPS system, Dallas Public Safety System.
Department of Public Safety.
Oh, Department of Public Safety
Texas
System.
Department of Public Safety.
And it says that since its inception, there's only been about 750 reports. So there's efforts to get more people to learn about this app or system. I don't even know how. I just see so many issues with this. Mostly because I don't even think we have the amount, not the amount, but I don't think we have the staffing or the resources to actively pursue these reports. Does that make sense?
It I know what you're saying. That if people report every little suspicion they have or every little activity that's questioned, it might overwhelm the system, and then they would not be able to plow through all the data to figure out which one is a real threat and which one isn't. Because
Yeah.
that would take a lot of resources. So you have to be careful if you push something out like that. You got people reporting stuff all over the place. Yeah, it may be a little overwhelming. And there would not be the resources to dig through everything.
So that's just one concern that I see. So it says iWatch Texas. This is according to a report by NBC DFW. It says that iWatch Texas has been around since 2013, but started taking school-related safety threats in 2018. The app is not a replacement for 911 and is a standalone app available for anyone to download. I still think, again, I'm just going to mention this, I just think that we don't have the amount of resources to actively pursue all of these reports. Because, I mean, there's been issues in the past where potential school shooters have been reported to the authorities only for nothing to have come of it, and then they carry out that school shooting. So how is this different? My question is, how is this different than those efforts in the past that have been taken, which have been shown not to work? So that's just what I'm saying. And then also the iWatch Texas, like that idea of just like this surveillance and like having people...
You got a Big Brother aspect to
There
this.
is a little bit of that Big Brother aspect in it. And at the same time, it's like these reports don't really produce any I mean, maybe there has been instances, I'm sure there have been instances where there have been a lot of potential dangers that have been stopped in its tracks. I know there have, but at the same time, I just don't think if you're going to push out an app like this, what is the resources for, or do we have the resources to pursue these reports? That was just the main question that kind of came off the top of my head.
I think it's a valid one because the more people have this app, the more people will tend to use it, and more people, it's a matter of perspective in regards to what people see and what's actually happening. Now, the fact that there's something out there, I think it's a benefit. It gives maybe potentially, if you make a pretty good, straightforward report on very specific situation, the people who monitor this app, might be able to flag that and realize, hey, there's something serious here, and identify that a little bit more quickly.
It's called a community reporting system. That's what the subtitle is of this iWatch app.
If you haven't read 1984, the neighbors reporting on neighbors is one aspect of that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm always aware of, like these data collection systems. I'm always aware of that, but at the same time, it's especially if it's given to the government,
or anybody.
Or private vendors. Yeah,
like Meta.
Okay, so that is just a mention, and that is those are just a few questions that I have around an app like this that's being pushed in our school system, and I believe that there are more, not aggressive ways, but like nuanced ways to tackle an issue such as school shootings, where an iWatch app can maybe play a part, but it's not the solution to the issue. Okay, there we go. That's what I said. So next we're going to talk about, do you want to talk about teacher shortage, or do you want to do Governor Abbott touts school choice agenda?
Teacher shortage?
Okay, let's talk about teacher. What are some issues facing Dallas schools? Again, we're kind of focusing on DISD, but this really can go anywhere.
This is a Texas article. The Texas Tribune did an article on why Texas faces a teacher shortage, and it's not just COVID-19, which...
I like that little. Hold on, wait. Pause. I like that little move you did.
Okay.
It was the little shake.
My dance move there.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I was pivoting a little bit.
Okay.
The students have suffered greatly. I mean, one of the first complaints was when we went to the COVID-19 change in the way that kids didn't go to school, or like virtual learning and stuff, that they were going to suffer. Their learning, their education was going to suffer, and it did. We all know that. But the flip side of that was the teachers suffered a lot of damage too. So they talk about in this article Last 2 years, public education system has been through the ringer, from shifting to online classes and debates about making masks mandatory to ongoing tensions over how race and sex should be taught in schools. So there's cultural issues, there's learning issues, a little bit of financial issues because teachers are not well paid, and then school safety, which she mentioned earlier. And it's not just, the horrible, horrible mass shootings, but kids are, acting up. They act up in class. And how do you discipline kids who act up in class? It's hard on these teachers. They got their hands tied behind their back. And teachers have had to deal with all these issues. And so how do you make this an attractive job with all these issues? And that's something that's facing every school district probably around the world. But more so, here with the shootings, it makes it even more scary. We've always had a teacher shortage. This is something that this state has combated for a long time, and part of that was originally because of pay. They have not been paid well. Over the years, you got people making millions doing goofy stuff, and teachers who are most important part of our society, or one of the most important part of our societies, barely making a decent wage to raise a family. It's also Texas is also one of the worst states for teacher retirement, which they do offer a pension, and teachers do get a pension, and it does have some benefits to it. But they're talking about Texas teachers have not received a cost of living raise since 2004. And of course, talk about, inflation we've talked about before, and on everybody's mind. This affects, people who are looking at something for a long-term career. So what are we looking at? Let me see. There's no statewide definition for what constitutes a teacher shortage, but vacancies, there's not teachers in the classroom. That's a teacher shortage. Attrition versus, how many people leave versus how many people are hired. And that's obviously a sign of a shortage being created. So what do we do? This article really didn't talk about, what are some solutions. It talks about how bad it's going to get over the next few years unless there's some changes made. So we know there's a shortage. We know there's a shortage out there, and I'm having a hard time finding.
And I want to not only talk about the shortage, but also about the fact that, teachers, this goes along with probably the reason of the shortage. And you mentioned this earlier when you were talking about the issues, is the lack of funding, but also the lack of funding when it comes to teachers are having to dip into their own pockets to pay for school supplies. Now, this is
for their classroom.
This is according to a nonprofit called adoptedclassroom.org, where they surveyed 5,400 teachers about their teacher spending in 2021. And it said teachers spent an average of $750 on school supplies out of pocket during that school year. And according to the survey, that's the highest amount ever, probably since the survey began. It says highest amount ever, but probably since the survey began. 30% of teachers have spent $1,000 or more on school supplies. And, here it goes. Teacher spending has increased about 25% since this first survey began in 2015. Also, students, not only do they not have school supplies, they don't have the infrastructure in place to do Zoom. Some of them don't. Or to have these online technological resources needed to succeed in the classrooms, like the modern day classrooms. So that's just another issue that I kind of wanted to bring up. There are some solutions when it comes to addressing how, so in I believe 2020, 2021, there was some fiscal money used to, let me read this article right here in front of me, which is from the Education Trust. And it says, the Department of Treasury invested $350 billion in state, local, and tribal governments to support recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Now, this website, I'll talk about what they do in a minute, looks into how those funds can address teacher and other staffing shortages, rehiring public sector workers, including teachers and other school staff who lost their jobs or retired, and restoring number of staff to pre-pandemic levels. I don't know if that's a solution. Rehiring public sector workers, including teachers and other school staff who lost their jobs or retired.
Well, it goes back to you have to give them a job they want to come back to.
Okay.
You know, that's a good point. You know, we're going to go hire these people. Well, you're not going to hire anybody, especially, I'm about to use a word I'm scared to use, but quality people, quality teachers, if you don't give them something.
Well, qualified.
Well, qualified and quality can be two different things.
You're right.
Okay. Yeah, you have to get a certificate and meet certain criteria. That's qualified. But, you know, people that we want to teach our children, people that, you know, have the ability to interact in a classroom where kids are engaged with them, that's, you know, to bring these people into the classroom, you have to offer them something. Mm-hmm. And are we offering these people that something? And, you know, you can say we're going to go out and hire this many people and that many people. Well, yeah, you can, you know, I mean, a lot of people want a job. They want to do something. They got to eat. But to get teachers, I mean, the concept of what a teacher is or what we want a teacher to be, which, you know, that's probably a moving target, you need to create an environment for them to want to be there and then to be able to be successful in it.
Mm-hmm. So going on to that point.
And, you know, so if they have to buy $1,000 out of their own pocket to help with, you know.
Yeah, that's not going to, people are not going to want to come back to that.
That doesn't attract them.
No. So awarding premium pay to school employees to perform work in person, including teachers and staff who keep school buildings running. So it's basically providing or prioritizing the people who are in person, giving them more money than people who may do it via online or something like that, which makes sense to me. Kind of like duh, but at the same time, I could be missing something because I've never been a teacher.
Neither have I. And I watched my mom teach, and she taught math in high school for decades, you know, while I was growing up. And, you know, she struggled some psychologically. She worked hard. She cared about, you know, what she did as a teacher. She would get frustrated when students weren't paying attention and when students didn't get the concept. And again, you know, there's always people who understand math and people who don't understand math.
am part of the latter, as you know. As you know, Dad, I had issues with math my entire life, including almost failing several times and having to go to a special classroom and just all this other, I mean, it was wild.
But that's a great point right there. Mm-hmm. You struggled with math. You had to go to a special classroom. Now, you didn't have to go to a special classroom.
It was a special classroom, Dad.
No,
even though they said it was something else. I looked at everyone else in that classroom and I was like, oh, this is a special classroom.
No. But how was that teacher?
I loved her.
Yeah.
And she loved me too, Miss Crimmins. Yeah, Miss Crimmins. Shout out to Miss Crimmins.
But in general, she got along with all her students.
Yeah, she did.
She understood, again, quality teacher. Yeah. She understood what she was doing. She was teaching people who were struggling with math. It wasn't struggling. It was just struggling with math. It was a class that helped people. And she was able to, I tried tutoring Vicky. That was a disaster. We tried. And it just, well, you know, father-daughter. But she was able to communicate these concepts to Vicky much more helpful. I'm trying to think of a better word. You know, that was much more beneficial to Vicky than I ever could, or any other previous teacher who just taught straight mathematical concepts in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And the way she taught, because we got to know this teacher a little bit more than average teacher because we were so concerned about Victoria.
Me passing?
Well, just, you know, you understanding so you can move on. And she really did understand that you had to engage students where they were, that infamous, you know, meet the people where they are. And she was really good at it. And, you know, finding people like this, a lot of schools need a lot of people like her. And you're not going to get them unless you create a better environment.
Mm-hmm. And here's another point to that. The better environment. Number one, there was like 8 students in that class compared to like 25 students that I would usually have to deal with or that the teacher would have to deal with. So smaller class sizes. It was longer. I think it was like an hour compared to like the 45 minutes for everyone else. And I don't think tutoring was required, but I know that there was some sort of...
You took tutoring with
her? Yeah, so I maybe it was required. like
I think
once
it was
a week.
available. I don't know if it was required, but I know it was available, and you took advantage of it.
Okay, so I do remember that tutoring was helpful in that regard, and a lot of teachers don't have time to do that.
That's a good point too, though, because we're not going to get schools with 8 children per classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That just isn't going to happen. So there's the general education where you can put 25 students in a classroom, something like that. But the secondary resources of having tutors available to people who are struggling. A lot of times, historically, you'd have private people doing it, and they charge $20. I don't know what it is now. Maybe it's much more than that now, per hour to send your kid to a student. There's now corporations that do tutoring. I don't know. There's some math.
No, there
tutoring.
are. Yeah, like Khan Academy, maybe not Khan Academy, but stuff like that. Yeah, they do tutoring. Yeah.
So that is something everybody can partner with, and that can help out the school districts if we have good, secondary resources for teachers to use and back them up and help the students. And I think we need to make more. We need to utilize these resources much more.
Mm-hmm. And so I did want to make a note about the resource that I was citing from, which is the Education Trust. According to their website, they're a national nonprofit that works to close opportunity gaps that disproportionately affect students of color and students from low-income families. Kind of sounds like Head Start a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Through research and advocacy, EdTrust supports efforts that expand excellence and equity in education from preschool through college, increase college access and completion, particularly for historically underserved students. That's another topic for another time about the need for college for a lot of the issues that are coming out from there, including student debt and all that stuff.
Oh boy, yeah. And then again, it's development. Some people aren't going to be successful in traditional university college atmospheres, but they need a higher level of education in some other area. And then maybe they can incorporate trade school with a series of higher education because they're going to be better at functional tasks than tasks that require a higher level of learning, like professions like doctors and lawyers and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that Grandma was a teacher, and then now we have another teacher in our family, Charles. Yeah. So he's a high school teacher?
Yeah, he teaches senior English.
Senior English. So I have my issues with my brother, as we all do with our family members, but ever since I've been a young kid, I've noticed he's always been in that role where he's like coached or helped or wanted to like mentor like younger people. Like he's like when I was in, or when he was in high school, he would do coaching, soccer coaching, and he would babysit, I think.
No, but high school he went to, I had a program where he could go out and work with younger students throughout area. And so they had different programs where the students had to go out and do community work. And he chose working with younger students.
Mm-hmm.
I thought my memory serves. And going back to, Vicki didn't also have the opportunity. My mom was much older when Vicki was in grade school. And so one of her older sisters, Andrea, also struggled with math. And yet my mother tutored her and was able to help her. Vicki didn't have that opportunity because my mother was pretty sick by the time Vicki was growing up.
I don't think she could have helped.
Yeah,
I think it was so bad.
No, she knew what she was doing. So yeah, it's just again meeting people where they are in their process.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but he's expressed his frustrations before with just students not being engaged, or inspired necessarily.
And did the pandemic cause that, or did it?
Probably.
Well, I think it amplified it. I don't know if it caused it.
That's a good way to say it, yeah.
I think we've been struggling for years. And again, what are we doing in schools? I'm just going to spit out this beef right now. We build football stadiums for schools. I like football. I played football as a kid up until middle school. But we don't need to be spending tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars and for a football stadium when teachers can't even, have help in the classroom to keep kids from blowing up.
That is very true. Yeah. That's a good point.
Priority point here.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much all of our input on ways to solve the teacher shortage
Well, we didn't solve it.
I know. I was like, how
identified
can
it.
I? Yeah, we identified the teacher shortage, and then we addressed some solutions made by a nonprofit. But at the same time, it's more about just having. So good point. Yes, we obviously have funding for these districts.
Yeah,
but the way that this funding is being used is not necessarily in accordance with or addressing the issues that we have right now. So, and
football does bring in money. Let's be honest. People love going to the local football game, the high school. This is Texas. High school football, they made a movie of it, Friday Night Lights. It's a big deal. But it shouldn't be the priority in regards to the budgets and how we're addressing this. It's for them to do something extra, to have fun. Yes, they get opportunities from playing it. They get camaraderie. They get wonderful lifelong relationships. Teammates, are lifelong friends in a lot of cases. These are good things. But our education of our children still should be the number one priority of a school district.
Yeah, because all these kids that are playing football are not going to go on to become pros.
NFL, yeah, they're not all of them. Very, very minutiae amount of them are. But they do get, a lot of them go on to play small college. They build relationships in their colleges and their universities. Any sports, no matter what the sport, is good for a child to participate in for a lot of reasons. It helps to build friendships, helps to build understanding of how to do things with each other, how to work together. All these kinds of things are important. But I'm saying it needs to take a backseat. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we need to think about the ultimate goal of an independent school district is to produce kids who can go into society and be productive across the board. And so that priority needs to kind of...
So we're going to wrap up this this podcast with just a mention, which this shouldn't really be a mention, but because we are under time constraints, it is going to be mentioned here because we can do it because it's my podcast. So school choice. So there have been, I feel has this always been an issue or has it been okay?
I don't say always, but when you were an itty bitty girl and in the kindergarten age, your mom and dad went down to Austin with a whole bunch of thousands of parents on a school choice issue. There was a
I think I remember this. We went on a bus.
Yep. We drove down and we all stayed in Austin because that's the state capital of Texas, and we all were there to support some bill supporting school choice.
Why did you support it? Why were you in support of it?
Because think about where you went to school.
I know. I went to, my entire life I went to a private school. Even college I went to University of San Diego. Shout out, University of San Diego.
But so...
Not shout out to the other places because they sucked. No, I'm joking.
And so it was important to us because I don't want to get into, because we're running out of time, the story that why we chose to put, and we made, the better half and I made some serious financial sacrifices and really sucked it up a lot to put our kids
and I thank
through
you for
school.
That. Yeah.
And there are reasons, and we were mad. I mean, talk about, but struggling with, helping schools do better, that point is why we were at that time more adamantly involved in the school choice debate. There's some problems with it. I don't like the way it's headed now, but when we were in the thick of it with our kids in school and how much the sacrifices we were making because we knew this was a better than our local school, elementary school. Oh, it was horrible.
Well, say what happened.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
we'll go to
important.
one of her older sisters.
Yeah, because it's important.
A teacher in a parent conference, and now we'd have been struggling for years with this school, this elementary school, and I don't want to say because there was good teachers there too, but one of our children was in a parent-teacher conference with us, the parents of the child, and kept calling our child number 7, number 8. I forget what number it was, but and I'm like, why are you referring to, my child has a name. Why are we going through this? And this wasn't the first one. This wasn't the fall one. This was the spring one. She'd been in the class all year. And she did this and she did that, number 7, whatever it was. And I said, why do you keep calling my child this number? And she goes, oh, maybe it was, I asked the child, Andrea, and that because the homework tray That was her number homework tray. So here she is talking to the parents. So I got mad. It's like, you can't talk to my child. You know, she's a person. And my wife was furious. I was furious. So we went to the principal. And he said, that's just the way she is. And I said, I don't want my kids coming to this school anymore if that's your attitude. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back moment. I mean, it had been building and building. And when I say my teacher, my child, and she has 20 some odd students, it's not impossible. I taught religious education on Sundays, and I knew all my students' names within the first month or two. And I only taught once a day on Sundays. I mean, this is relationship building, and this is teaching the children something. This is elementary school. So next year, we made the choice, and she's the second oldest, and so everybody behind her, Charles and Victoria, ended up in private school. It was fun, but we weren't. That just infuriated me.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the reasons why this
quality teachers.
Yeah, why it's coming up. School choice. So school choice allows public education funds to follow students to the schools or services that best fit their needs, whether that's a public school, private school, charter school, home school, or any other learning environment families choose. That's according to edchoice.org. There are different types of school choices, and that's the part that probably is actually really confusing when it comes to something like this, is because it's just much more than like vouchers.
Yeah, and that's important because, it would have helped us to have vouchers to be able to put you through school. And that's one reason we were involved, because it was a sacrifice. And I think if parents are making a sacrifice and they're paying taxes into a public school district, something has to give. I don't know what it is, but there needs to be some balance to that, because, we paid for the public school system we didn't use.
Mm-hmm. And so this is just something that Governor Abbott is running on, because he's up for re-election, huh?
Yep.
So this is just one of the things that he's running on, and he actually made a stop in Dallas on August 11th, and he was pushing his school choice agenda at a South Dallas private school, and what he's saying is that this is a quote from him: "Some children have different education needs. We need to understand that some schools may provide a one-size-fits-all approach to educating our kids. And the fact of the matter is not all kids are that same size. Different kids needs different programs," end quote. And then the article goes on to say, this is from the Dallas Morning News, "The state should not have the authority to keep children in public school systems when they're not succeeding." That's the point he was trying to make. So it's quite interesting. And this is one of the issues that Governor Abbott is running on. Again, whether or not Governor Abbott has the... because it is a popular choice among Texas voters, I don't know how serious he is about pushing this as a political agenda and in a legislative sort of capacity.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
How does it play out?
Yeah,
in law? And do we have vouchers? Do we not have vouchers? Do we refund the entire school system in Texas? And again, it goes back to the quality education. He talk about, you needed a special class with 8 people to get through 1 year of math, but that's all really.
That wouldn't have happened in a public school.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't know. Obviously, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just say, because we quit public schools. My sister, we hadn't even talked about that.
Oh,
My
that's
sister
right.
is a teacher, and
That's
she teaches
true.
special ed. So she has small classroom size, but she teaches the real special education classes. And I hate saying
Where they had testing. Yeah, but it's like
where
legitimate.
it's really determined. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they are smaller class sizes. So there's something there. But in a secondary thing where you're just struggling in one particular subject and have the ability to pull yourself out and be dealt with on a more individualized level, you may be right. They may not have it, but we can't say for sure. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. And so just to wrap it up, there is no currently there's no school choice legislation or bill or act in Texas at the moment. There are some in other states. There's Louisiana, I believe Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know it was in North Carolina. Yeah. But it looks like about half. I'm looking at a map. It looks about like half the states have some sort of school choice option. an option or something that would fall under the umbrella of school choice, such as tuition donation credit program, school choice program for certain students with exceptionalities, student scholarship for education excellence program, all that good stuff.
And one thing to look at in as I step back from it years ago is, are we going to start creating, and I don't know the word I want to use right now, got to be careful. There's a wealth gap in this country. And do we create an education gap in this country because certain people who go to these other schools manage to get a better education, and yet the general populace, their education level declines? So it would be interesting to note how kids are in the public schools in those states have done historically compared to how they did after all these changes were made. Because we don't want to just shortchange public education.
Yes.
We can't do that. Everybody needs a good education. I mean, that's a need. It's not a right, unfortunately. And people talk about rights, and they got them so screwed up, it's not even fun anymore. But that's a need that a society needs, an educated populace to be a successful democracy. It's one of the 5 primary ways to have successful democracies, have an educated populace.
All right. So with that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we will talk to you soon.